Okay. So I'm 1 minute late getting back. Sorry. If you refresh Blackboard now, there is a something I just added. .docx. So if you open that up, I started writing some stuff down. So the first thing I wrote there is, I don't have to write any JavaScript code question. I just want to make sure everybody knew that, both campuses. There's no code writing for the test. The other thing I want to make sure right up front is, right now, this document isn't final. I just started making this, and I didn't get all the way through. I haven't actually written the test yet. So like I said, tomorrow morning, I'll write the test, and I'll expand this document. So what that means is you should re-download this Friday. Or what day is today? Today's Tuesday. So we download it on Thursday. Okay. All right. So what I would do to study for the test is look back through your notes and the lectures that are available. I know in this class the lectures are kind of informal, where I basically talk from the reading. So you have the videos for most of them, and you also have my talking about the notes. So I've listed some information down here that would be particularly useful. So we're gonna go through that. The format of the test is mostly short answers. In other words, like what that means is that you have to come up with the answer. It's not going to be listed, but it's usually just a word or a sentence. It is a mix, so it's mostly short answer, but there are some multiple choice questions, and I'm thinking that there will be one or two longer form answers, but I don't know for sure. So look for an update for this to this sentence. Right. So you have reading associated with most of each of the topics. I know we didn't have a reading last week because that's because it was a continuation. Although I have not written the test yet, I plan on making. Okay. Basically, I plan to give you 2 hours to take it, but I picture that most people will have no problem completing it in 1 hour. But that's not to say you have the full 2 hours to take it. I'm just trying to say it's not a huge test. All right. I don't know how many pages it is right now. Maybe I'll update that in a second. After I write it. Okay, so what I want you to do is go back and look at each section. So basically we covered, I would say, 3 different sections so far in this course. We talked about, and the first 2 were just 1 week. The second one was 3 weeks. This should actually be bold. So these 2 were 1 week each, where we talked about the background and history, and then we talked about system architecture. So you need to know what a web service is and how it works. It's basically a program that responds to HTTP requests. In other words, when a request from a URL comes in, it responds. And that response can be text, or it can be image. It can be data, but that data is still in a text format. We'll kind of hit that home a little bit more today. Okay? How does it work? If you know that it works by, there's a program running on a computer that's waiting for it, that's enough. What's a request? The request is the information that's sent to the server. The response is the information that's sent back from the server. So what is a client and what is a server in this framework? They're both they're both computer programs, but the client is the one that sends the request and receives the request. The server is receives the response. The server is the one that processes the request and sends out the response. What's a URL? URL stands for Universal Resource Locator. How is a URL a request? It is basically a formal set of instructions for a document for something that is out there on the internet. So like this URL this URL right here, not this one right here, that is a URL, and it's a request for this document. This server knows how to interpret this request. Now the format of the request there's no like standard format for how the requests are. Sometimes you'll see the options are actually listed after a question mark. Sometimes you'll see that on other websites. You don't need to know this for the test. I'm just telling you that sometimes you'll see a question mark and you'll see information after the question mark. Sometimes you'll see hashtags like that. Anyway, that's a URL. And a URL contains the information that the server needs to process a request. This is the response, by the way, right here. This is the response from the server for this request. And so if you look at the code that we've been dealing with today, right here, this is the code that asks to make the request. This is the code that deals with the response. Okay. Back to oh no. I wonder, because I didn't change the name of this, I wonder if it overwrote it. Anyway, I'll find out after I get done with this. All right. So that's this. What decade did web mapping start? Started in the 90s. What point did it reach a point where it is similar today? Mid to late 2000s. That's really when we got the APIs and the slippery maps where we could pan and zoom without having to refresh the page. Okay, FOSS, what does it mean? It stands for free and open source. What are the benefits of FOSS? The drawbacks and challenges? So you should be able to, there was a table in this lecture. You should be able to recognize the FOSS equivalents for ArcGIS products. So basically, QGIS is the equivalent of ArcGIS desktop, and WMS is the equivalent of ArcGIS server, or map server. Okay, we talked about open specifications and open formats. Go back and review that. Basically, what the difference between those terms are. Okay, system architecture. So on the second week, we actually showed a diagram. So go look at the diagram. We showed it actually a few times in that lecture. So make sure that you understand the different components. Okay? So the different components being the client, the server, and then the server itself. We could have a web server, a geospatial server, and a database server, and they each have different roles. They don't always have to be separate machines. I wrote, are they always separate machines? No. They don't always have to be separate machines, but they are separate pieces of software. A web server runs code that responds to requests, to URL requests. That's what it does. A geospatial server responds to geospatial requests. And it also often is in forms of URLs. What's the role of database server? That's to keep track of the data itself. So here's a question. Are desktop programs such as ArcMap and QGIS Server program, are they server programs or client programs? So the correct answer to this question, what's that? Is that they're clients. Okay? They don't respond to requests from other clients. They're thick clients, but they're clients just like your web browser. When you want to get data, that data gets served up. These programs create requests. In fact, you can access other WebGIS data through those programs. We demonstrated that in class. So the mechanics of how web mapping map works, that right there, you just basically need to know that a web mapping application is written in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and that as the user interacts with the map, requests are made, and responses are generated, and the client then takes care of doing something like panning or zooming or providing more information to the user. And then base maps versus thematic data on the map. There was some text on that in that lecture as well. Okay, so for the JavaScript and JSON section, as I'm calling it, basically I want you to be able to define some terms. And this is an incomplete list. I'll make this list longer. But we've got element. We've got an element is a thing on the HTML page, an item on the HTML page. So it has a tag. It can be an anchor tag. It can be a div tag, a span tag, an image tag. Those are all elements. They're just items on the page. And they can have attributes, and one of the most common attributes that they have is an ID. Okay. What is an event and a handler? So an event is something that happens on a web page, and a handler is a function that is meant to respond to an event. Okay, a variable is so we went over this again today. So a variable is a reference to some item. Now, usually it's either a number, a string, or what else do we do? We talked about a number, a string, an array, or an object. Any of those things, you reference to any of those things. GeoJSON. GeoJSON is the JSON part stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it's right now it's the most prevalent format for sharing vector data on the web. It's what we talked about today in today's lecture. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. The leaflet is an API. The ArcGIS JavaScript API is an API. Technically, jQuery is an API, but it's not a mapping API. It's an API for interacting with elements on a web page. What's a function? Function is a set of code that encapsulates. Well, I was about to say it encapsulates a set of code, but encapsulates a set of instructions. Usually you use a function when you're going to run something many times. So you see functions a lot. when we're loading layers and we're saying, okay, for every feature, do this, or for each item in OS, do this. So function is a encapsulated set of code. Okay, I'm just thinking of a few others that aren't on here. You should know what CSS is, even though you don't need to know much about how to use CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It's a way to style the elements on a page. All right. If I think of any more, I'll add them to the list. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry, there's two questions, so I'll answer that one because I heard you. Heather, every assignment is due 2 weeks after it's assigned. So 2 weeks from today. So that's a good question. So the question was, basically, how do clients and servers, how are they related to events? So an event is something that, event is always something that happens on the client. So an event is something that an event is something that you track. That was something that happened because the client clicked, or the client moved something, or the client did something. The handler can send a request to the server, but it can also be handled totally internally. So like on our click event where we just reported the coordinates, there's no server involved in that request. You click, and it calculates the coordinates right on the client and reports them back. So the handler can involve a request to the server, but it doesn't have. Right. It's just what happens. It's just what happens. Okay. I don't think that it actually. Let me try something here. Okay, I think this is going to be weird on the video, on the actual video. I'm going to see what it's in there. Okay, good. So it looks like until I press stop on the record, that see I still have it. It's still there. So this is the lecture, and it's still there. And so I renamed it because I don't think it actually writes over it until I hit stop. So it's still there. So I'll be able to upload it. I wonder if I can still change it right now. I'm going to try that. So any other questions? I'll go ahead and press stop and see if it does that.